everybody. Good morning, everybody. It's my honor to stand here to introduce myself and introduce our experiences in China in the past few years. So at the very beginning, please allow me just maybe take a few minutes to have a very brief self-introduction. OK, it's worked. Who am I? My Chinese name is Wang. There is the Chinese characters. I believe you can recognize it, right? In the Chinese language, the first name and the last name is just reversed if compared to the English. The family name is take the first place. So my family name is Wang, but my first name is Wei, but at the second place. So just get used to it. And I have an English name because after graduate from the college, I've worked for different global companies. So I believe if I got an English name, that will be more convenience for my colleagues to reach me or to figure out who I am. So my English name is David. You can call me David, and I'm from Tharwas, China. My base office is Beijing office, a very beautiful office. Actually, just like this, we have a beautiful scene from the window. We can just see the old cities, and it's very, very good. And I'm a developer, an architect, and a consultant. Actually, after graduate, I worked as a C++ developer for many years. Worked for different organizations like NEC and Nokia China. And then I joined ThoughtWorks and take a role as a consultant to provide some consulting services in terms of the technical practices or the software architecture. Yeah, for sure, domain-driven design. Yeah, a DDD practitioner. Actually, I have heard that DDD is, the first time I heard of the domain-driven design is around 4 years or 5 years ago. It's not so a long history for me personally, because that's just after I entered the ThoughtWorks. The ThoughtWorks have a lot of the agile practices in terms of the technical and development and the architectural design. So I've learned DDD from that time, from my colleagues, from my team, from the client actually. Some senior people from my client also teach me a lot. So I'm a DDD practitioner. I can say I'm a DDD practitioner now in China. And just as someone recognized me, I'm the coordinator of the DDD China community. Later, in the later part, I will just give a very brief introduction of the community, what a community is, why we have the idea, have such a community, and also the conferences. Last but not least, I'm a husband and a father. I have my daughter is 5 years old, and this time because the time gap between Beijing and China, based on our experience, I believe she cannot get used to it. So I just leave her in Beijing. So I missed her a little bit. 1 week, another week ahead. So that is my self-introduction. So let's start today's session about the DDD in China. Let's start from this. Everyone here is familiar with this drama, right? Westworld is very cool. It's my favorite drama in the past 2 years. I like it very much because if my memory was correct, at the very beginning of this drama, the Dolores, right? It's just a robot. It's just a robot. He just followed the instruction. But eventually, just found herself have a consciousness. How she got such a consciousness? What is her journey? What is her journey looks like? If my memory was correct, at the very first stage or very initial stage of the Dolores journey, she just heard someone talk to her. Just when she worked, when she worked as a host or as an actress in the theme park, he can hear someone talk to her. And then something happened just like this picture. She recognized that it's not anyone else talk to her, but herself talk to her. So that I think that is for me, when I first to check out this drama in China, it's a little bit confused for me personally. Why is such a talking is just lead the Robert got a consciousness? So I got some Google, so I got some dig into the background theories, so I got this. Bicameral mind. Anyone has heard or familiar with this? Okay, I got one. Actually, the editor of the Westworld, J.J. Abrams, has now created such a theory in the Westworld by himself. He just inherited some ideas from the philosopher Julian Jaynes. In this book, the origin consciousness in the breakdown of the bicameral mind, the Julian Jaynes have introduced a theory. This theory is, as a human being, as a Homo sapien, in terms of the consciousness, what is the consciousness? In everyone's brain, we have two parts differently. One part is just take the responsibility to talk, and another part is just to follow the instruction. So let's just imagine the Dolores' journey. At the very beginning, she just to hear somebody talk to her, and she just follows such an instruction. And then eventually, got the consciousness is just because he recognized that. She recognized that just herself talked to herself, right? So she got a consciousness. So just in this theory, the bicameralism is a hypothesis in psychology that argued the human mind was operated in a state in which cognitive functions were divided between one part of brain which appeared to speak, and another part is to listen and obey. So if we recognize the consciousness is to sensing or to feeling the world around us, so how could a speaking language can help us get such a consciousness? So I got this. Steven Pinker. Steven Pinker is a philosopher, is a psychologist and also a linguist from the Harvard University. In his book, The Stuff of Thought, he introduced there is some substance of the language, something like this. A concept of space in every language, all kinds of language on this planet, a concept of space is in prepositions. And the concept of matters is in nouns. Concept of time is in tense, past tense, future tense, current tense, something like that. And concept of causality in verbs. Is that sounds familiar, right? Just like event storming, huh? The first time I got it, I have checked the video, the Steven Pinker on the YouTube. I just feel, wow, it's just the philosophy. It's very similar to the event storming, because event storming we have tense, we have nouns, we have we does not have the prepositions, but we have the verbs. Yeah, it's very similar. So in such cases, what the real meanings of a language? So as the Steven Pinker's theory, he believed the language is a result of modeling. Just like as this picture. In English, how could we just describe this girl's position? This girl is my colleague and also my friend, also from Star Wars. How could we just describe her current position? She's underwater, right? But she's we say she's underwater, but actually she's just surrounded by water. She's not under the water. Why we say she's underwater? Just because I have this question make me a little bit curious about the language itself. So I just think maybe someone initially see the water or create the water, the modeling in the water, just stand on the beach or the lakeshore and see the water. Water is just the surface, right? If someone dive into the water, so okay, she or he just underwater, is underwater, right? So that is modeling. So this man just modeled water as a surface. So that is a kind of modeling. Also, this is another story I'm taking from the Steven Pinker's session. I believe most of you have got more familiar with this history of the United States. In 1881, the President Garfield was assassinated by the assassinate Guito. The man who assassinated the president is Guito. The assassination happened on the July 2nd, if my memory was correct. And after that, they just sent the president to the hospital and got some treatment and got some the doctor to do some operations to save his life. But unfortunately, 2 months later, the president is dead, just because some infections. Maybe someone believed that is a misoperation from the doctor. So the Guito, the assassinate, have been executed eventually, just by the reason. The reason is very simple, because he killed the president. But before his execution, he stood in front of the judge. He stood in front of the judge and defends himself as the doctor killed him. I just shoot him. It's very interesting, right? But it sounds it's very ridiculous. But if we model it, or if we just visualize what is his modeling looks like, it will look like this. There are 3 domain events. Garfield was wounded, was infected, and Garfield was dead, right? So the only decision to make such an event happens is just a shoot, and the Guito must take responsibility to shoot the president. But from the Guito's modeling, he modeled the business process like this. The doctor rescued the president, but afterwards, the president is dead. So who will take the responsibility of the death of the president? Doctor or assassinate? It's very interesting. So actually, my point is the language is really the window of a cognition, also a result of a modeling. So based on this, in terms of the software development or the enterprise software development, we will find that each of the enterprises have their own language. They have a language set. They have their own language to describe describe their business process, to describe different departments, different organizations. If such an enterprise have their own in-house development team, everything is good, because it's very easy to keep the ubiquitous language alignment and keep the language tidy. Everybody understands what that means, what this word means, and what the modeling is. But only if there's a vendor. This enterprise is just maybe a manufacturer or just a bank or some insurance companies. It does not build up. They have not built up their in-house development team yet. They just depends on some other vendors, depends on some other teams. So this vendor, the vendor A, they have their own language set, because of the vendor must provide some services not just for one enterprise. They must provide the same service or similar service to all their customer or all their clients in one certain industry, right? So vendor A got their language, and also maybe another vendor got a language, got a vendor B's language, vendor C's language. So if we modeling such a relationship in a context mapping, what is the relationship we can describe such relationship between the enterprise and each vendor? Who is the upstream? Who is downstream? Enterprise downstream. Enterprise downstream. So yeah, I agree that, because somehow the enterprise, even the enterprise have a lot of money. They got powerful from the financial perspective, but they are lacking the capability of the technical perspective. They're lacking the technical thinking or technical capability. So the only thing they can do is just follow the vendor's approach. So they are downstream. So what is how can we just categorize the relationship between this upstream and the downstream? It's a collaborating relationship, conformist, or it's just a customer and a client relationship. Conformist. Sometimes it's a conformist, and most of the time, actually in China, we have found a lot of the enterprises like this, working like this, is a conformist. They have a lack of the capability to argue of the very detailed or even just a very high level technical designs or the application modeling designs. They have no such capability or they have no such power to persuade the vendor, okay, you must change your model. The vendor will say, no, I am the best in this industry. You must follow me. You must follow my model, right? So these two languages have clashed together. The enterprise language and the vendor's language, and also sometimes the vendor A have been replaced by another vendor. Because maybe I've cooperated with some enterprises, they just have the policy. Maybe one relationship with a certain vendor cannot extend 5 years. So yeah, we must change to another vendor. So in such cases, the enterprise will conform a new context from the new vendor D, right? So they will conform a new one. How about their system? How about their model? They does not have model at all, right? Their language, their business, the special point, or their business, the core domain of their business, the value of their business process cannot be expressed, cannot be supported by such approach between, or by such a relationship between the enterprise and the vendors. This is one scenario of the language exchange between two different organizations. Also in China, we are facing another problem. Just like I'm here, I am a little bit struggling to express the English very more precisely, actually. So English and Chinese, and from the linguistic perspective, is totally different. It's totally different from alphabet, phonology, verb, tense, many things else, just like in Chinese, it does not have past tense, right? It does not have past tense. The verb will never change in whatever such action happened before or happened 1 day later. So it's totally same. So there are many things else between the English and the Chinese have differences. So how could we just adopt some programming language or written or implement the model with the programming language which inherit a lot of the grammar from the English itself? That is challenging for the Chinese technology ecosystem or the technology community. Yeah, I'm going back to the Steven Pinker again, and I just want to figure out what is the such a situation. If we just from the language perspective, is there any similar situation where any similar scenario happens in language part? So we found that. So I found this. Pidgin language. Pidgin language is something like maybe 100 or 300 years ago. Two different nations, people need to trade together, or they need to exchange ideas together, need to discuss something. But maybe as a Chinese, maybe 200 years ago, Chinese, we have no very systematic the education of the English, how to speak English, right? So I want to talk to you, but I just can adopt some very simple words, very simple maybe grammar to express myself, to make you understand me. So that will, two mother language will generate evolve a new language. It's a Pidgin language. Such language have a lot of the features. For example, have a small vocabulary. It's a lack of the grammar details or lack of very details about maybe the verbs or actions or decisions or responsibilities. So lack of some details, but they can express the idea, to exchange the idea. And also, the Pidgin language is keep evolving. It always keep evolving, because if we are two organizations or we are two nations, we need somebody use the Pidgin language to communicate. We want to make everybody in such a room or in such a situation can understand each other. Yes, among us, we need to stand on the same page. So such a language, as the newcomers jump into the situation or get involved into this situation, the language will get evolved. And also, after maybe such as the Chinese people immigrate to the United States and their second generation of the Chinese people, they will, because the child have a great ability to learn and create some new languages, they will just make such a Pidgin language with more details, with tense, with the grammar, with the correct grammar, with the diversities to express the different ideas. This is a Pidgin language. Eventually, the Pidgin language will become stable. Initially, it's not so stable. It's a keep change. But eventually, it will be stable as a ubiquitous language. So after it's stable, from the linguistic perspective, it's named another language. It's a Creole language. So on this planet, there are lots of the Creole language, just like the English in Singapore. Actually, from the linguistic perspective, it's a Creole language, because it makes a little bit about the Mandarins or the Southern Chinese language and the English language. But how about in the situation I just described before? One enterprise and a different nation, different vendors. The vendors, the portfolio have keeping change. No old people or old vendor have get out and the new vendor get in. So just imagine the situation, the vendor D replaced the vendor A. The vendor A have create the Pidgin language with the enterprise already maybe, but 5 years later, a new speaker of the vendor D have jump in, and the vendor A jump out. So a new Pidgin language will be created. They can never adopt the original one. The original Pidgin language will stop there, but it will stable in a system which implemented by the vendor A, right? So vendor D got the handover of the old system which created by the vendor A and speak to the enterprise to say, hey, I cannot handle that. It's a very legacy system. How about let's just rewrite it to replace it with a new one? So it's the conversation we are facing every day, right? So that is the bring some debt into our system. Sometimes we call it the language debt. Call it the technical debt. But here I just rename it as the language debt. I don't know whether it's precisely or not. But it's just because the two different contexts have collapsed together, but the language context does not exist anymore. So the debt have been there. So this is a language debt. That is the major reason I think in most of the Chinese enterprises want to modernize or want to replace their legacy systems. The most of the reason why they want to do this. So at the very first time they come to us to write, hey David, could you please help us to make a proposal to how could we modernize our system? They bring some problems, right? So my first question will be what problem you are facing, what problem you want to solve. So there are different problems. For example, in-house business responsiveness. Such legacy system, because the vendor D could not understand the original model, could not adopt the original Pidgin language. So their responsiveness, their implement pace is very slow. So the enterprise will say, okay, could you please help me to accelerate it to make the team work more faster and more agile. So this is one. And enhance the resiliency of the system. maybe 10 years ago, the system is just designed by most of the business process is offline business process. They just do some record, just put the paperwork into the system and record it. It's good. But now, from maybe 10 years pass by, and today, they must be connected with different digital channels. For example, a mobile channel, web channel, or some other third-party systems. So the resiliency from such a legacy system is a big problem. Could we just have a high concurrency, a high availability, something like that? Some conversation will go like that. And also enhance the user experience, because the legacy system, the experience is not so good. So could you just enhance it? Reduce licensing cost, because I have cooperated with some enterprises. They have pay a huge money to the existing vendor, to an existing vendor, just because the vendor just does not provide the source code to the enterprises, because the IP issue, right? So they have charged the enterprise a lot of money for the annual license and the maintenance consulting fees. So they want to just reduce such a licensing cost by replace this kind of the legacy system with a new, maybe with new technologies or open technology stack. And also replace according to some policies, maybe coming from a government, coming from a regulatory, or something like that. Okay, such a system or such technical stack must be sent down, and new system must be replaced. Yeah, something else. Every enterprises have their own problems, and actually I've never met the situation two enterprises have a very exact same reasons to do the legacy modernization. So what the problem looks like, actually at the very beginning, I just think, wow, a large scale, maybe millions of codes, the legacy system with the millions of the PR SQL code is just look like this. The team cannot, it's fear to change even just one line of code just because it does not know what will happen if I just change it, or I just delete it. What function will not work? I don't know. Maybe all the system will down. Maybe everything is good. I have no idea. So that is the most challenging things when we just jump into a system, jump into a environment surrounded by a lot of the legacy system. Based on Professor Dave Snowden's Cynefin framework, what such a kind of problem belongs to in this category? I believe most of you is familiar with the Cynefin framework, right? So I will not give very much detail. But based on our experience, obviously, the legacy modernization is not belongs to an obvious problem, right? It's not so simple. It's not so simple. It also does not belong to the complicated problem. We cannot give there a manual to say, okay, just following this manual, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, your legacy is modernized. We never do this. It never worked. So a legacy modernization is much more like a complex problem or a chaotic problem. Complex problem is sometimes we found, okay, the team there or the vendor there, they have the willing to change their system, or they have maybe not so bad the test suite or the testing coverage. They have the practice like the continuous integration, something like that, continuous delivery, something like that. So it's just complex, I think. But sometimes there's nothing. There's nothing. They are very traditional. They follow a very traditional waterfall-like the process, working process, and they follow a very traditional the design process of the bunch of the design documentation. So such a modernization work, but I will just recognize it as a chaotic problem. So in such problem, according to Professor Dave Snowden, so he said never to try to manage the complex problem itself, just manage its constraints. Just manage each problem. It has its constraints, right? Has its boundaries. If we recognize a problem belongs to a complex problem, we just manage the constraints surround it. Just like in China, there is a very widespread, the old story. Maybe 1,000 years ago, there's a very huge flooding across the country, and the king of the country have arrested up to actually the previous king of the country is failed to save the country from the flood because he is willing to change the river, or just to make a block does not to let the river or that does not let the flooding into the field. So just he built up some different walls or different dams to prevent this, but he failed. But the next king got to succeed because he's never to build a dam. He just to build a new river, build a new tunnel to let the flooding to go another way. So this approach is some sort of to build a new or enabling a new constraints to make the complex problem is follow the direction you want, where you want to. So that is to try to manage a complex problem itself, manage its constraints. So what is the constraints in terms of the legacy modernization? Something like this. We need some scaffolding. We need some scaffold to help us to make the system safe, make the business safe. So usually we just, in such cases, we are leverage some different DDD or domain-driven design practices to build up the constraint, to build up the scaffold and rediscover where is the ubiquitous language to help the enterprise and the vendor to make the language more stable. So very first step is to rediscover the ubiquitous language with some scaffolding. This scaffold is much more like a practice, or much more like maybe a workshop, maybe some methodologies, some practices. So we use event storming in China, across China. You can see there are different the client sites. We have organized the different event storming. And the first one, the second, and the bottom one belongs to telecommunication enterprises. We have helped them to identify, to discover where is your ubiquitous language, what is your the business process looks like, or what is your scenario looks like. And the third one on the upper right is we also use the event storming in a bank to helping them to build up their ubiquitous language. So event storming. Also, we use some other scaffolding, some other sorts of the workshops or some sorts of the practices. This guy on the left side is the leader of the Scala community in China. So he's very brilliant. So he just want to try it. He just to talk to me something as, oh, okay, David, you guys always try the event storming. I want to try something different. I said, good. You just go ahead. Please just try anything you want. If you just to tackle a problem, I think every approach is good. So he just organized some different approaches. I think most of the practice is designed by himself, but just the nouns, verbs, and some other elements of the language. And also we have leveraged a different workshop. Actually, it's also we borrow some ideas from the event storming, and but the outcome of the workshop on the right side is to identify where is the pinpoint of the business unit. There is no technical guys involved in this workshop. We just identify where is your business pinpoint, what is the potential opportunities, and maybe later some other enhancement or some other disruptive initiative will be pop up. So this is first. And also we have built up some scaffolding to help the system to evolve, because we believe we cannot just tackle the legacy system directly, very large scale legacy system directly. So we build up scaffolding to make it to help it evolve. First, we build up some. We have leveraged some the commercial software or some open source software to get to know the legacy code base better. Do some something like the dependency analysis and some quantitative analysis based on of the existing code base. So this is first. This will help the team to know their code base better and know where is the highly coupled component, whether it's doable or not. Maybe in the first stage we just decouple this module first, or maybe at the very first stage we just choose a loose coupling part to decouple it. So this is first, and also we leverage ideas coming from the evolutionary architecture. We leverage the arc unit, and also we have design and implement some script to ensure the development team, the vendor's development team, have follow the same direction or follow the very same ubiquitous language, the model we have designed before or we have discovered already, with some tools, with some of the testing tools like the arc unit. And also we have made something like the porting legacy code to modern platform. We have tried leverage the Antler framework and to transform the PR Circle code to the Kotlin code directly, automatically actually, but just part of it. This will help the client to adopt the new technologies maybe in the next future, and then they can adopt some new practices around the automation testing and refactoring just based on the Kotlin stack, not a PR Circle stack, because PR Circle is for us is really not a good topic to work on. Yeah. From the quality perspective, we have built up, because the system is keep running, so we build up some testing suite coming from the testing data, and we have run the test suite in parallel with the existing one, the legacy one, and the new one. And we check whether the data is totally same. If the data is the same, we think, okay, the refactor, we never change the business logic. We just to refactor it into a new form. Okay, that's good. But if the data is different, that will be some problems. So we will refine our approaches, something like that. Also, the capability, the team's capability is also a scaffold, because we can never imagine if the team does not learn some new approaches or does not learn some new practices, they can keep the ubiquitous language in a very long future. So we have provided some the trainings or pair works with the teams there. So my colleague and I, we will just work with the team together, sit together, work together to help them to adopt some new practice like the DDD automation testing, refactoring, something like that. Yeah, if we actually, there are several cases running in parallel in China in terms of the legacy modernization. So sometimes I just rethink about what is our approach. We actually, in the daily work, or in the working level, we just do it just by to solve one problem and then a problem, then a problem. But if we look back, we will see the entire process of the legacy modernization, I think it's more systematic than I initially imagined or initially think. It's just a process of the revival of the ubiquitous language. Previously, there is a ubiquitous language in the system, or no matter it's a Pidgin language or Creole language, but there is a ubiquitous language. But as the time flies, as the vendor flies, as the team changes, people changes, people out, people in. So the language has corrupted. What we are trying to do in China is just to help the team with the legacy system to rediscover or revive the ubiquitous language. So in terms of the revival of ubiquitous language, we have three key takeaways. First is discover the language and bound it context with the cooperative, with the creative approaches. This is one. Second, build up scaffold to enable constraints in a complex problem. We are never to touch the complex problem directly, but first we build up the scaffolding. We build up a set of the scaffolds to ensure the system, the problem goes to the direction where we want to. This is the second. Third, build up long-term or outcome-oriented teams to maintain the language. We can never imagine if the vendor keep changing. Oh, we have modernized the legacy system maybe within 2 years, but another vendor jump in. Maybe the language is becoming corrupted again, and the modernized system will become another legacy system. So that is the situation we are not want happen. Yeah, 5 minutes. So at last, I want to give a very brief introduction of DDD practices, domain-driven design practices in China. Actually, in China, we have adopted domain-driven design practices from around 2010, actually in parallel with the agile practices and the continuous delivery practices have adopted in mainland China. So now we have introduced domain-driven design practices into different domains. As a telecommunication device manufacturer, they have the 5th generation mobile network, their core network control plane have designed by the domain-driven design. We have helped them to do the domain-driven design, to define the ubiquitous language, to adopt the domain model, and adopt the concept of the aggregate entity value object, something like that, in the control plane of the core network. And also banks. In banks, we have adopted the domain-driven design in some business process systems and some channels implementations. And also insurance companies, they are trying to modernize their core system. So we leverage the domain-driven design. We use the methodology, we use the practices to helping them to modernize their systems. And also automotive manufacturers and the energy companies and retail. We have there actually in the last years, the domain-driven design conferences, we have lots of the DDD practitioners coming from the startups and some of the internet companies, or just as the Alibaba, Huawei, Tencent. All of these guys is coming from the different background, not only just the manufacturer or not only coming from the bank companies. So they are from different organizations or different community. So 2 years ago, we have seen there are lots of practices have taken place in China. So the idea come to us is we have known that there is a conference and a community in Europe and the United States. Why we can't have it in China? So my team and I have just collaborate very closely and to deliver the very first the domain-driven design China conference 2 years ago. Yeah, with the help of the Alberto. Alberto was there, provide a very brilliant keynote speech. And the last year, we have grown the audience or the practitioners of the attendees from 300 people of the 2017 to 450 people last year. So it's a growth very quickly. But this year, we have renamed it. We have previously we are named it as the DDD China Conference, but now we are renamed it as a DDD Conference just because some government department have reached us because they have searched our website and browsed our website according to the compliance problem in China. We cannot use the word of China in the conferences and in the community because they want to avoid some confusion whether such a community or conference has been founded by the government. They want to avoid such thing. So we cannot use China anymore. So yeah, this year we just have a shortcut, the DDD conference 2019, but maybe next year we will rename it to a more straightforward name. It's not a good name, I think. So this year we are not target to have many more people join us. Maybe we just keep the same scale as the around 400 people to 450 people join us. and we want to enhance the sessions capability, the sessions quality, and we want to bring more diversity into this community and this conference. So that is what happens in China in terms of domain-driven design. And as the coordinator of the DDD China community, I'm here. Welcome every one of you coming to China and join the community. And I believe the Chinese community is willing to communicate with the global community in all of the topics, maybe the Lexis system, maybe the ubiquitous language, maybe in the high-level strategy level, maybe in the tactical level. I think everything is perfect. So yeah, that is the domain-driven design, China, and that is my session. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Thank you.